So what will it take to achieve peace in Afghanistan's volatile landscape? To discuss this, we're joined by Richard Chasdi, a professor at Walsh College in Michigan. He's a specialist in terrorism and counterterrorism studies. Always a delight to have you on the broadcast, Richard. A second round
Thanks for having me.
You bet. A second round of peace talks scheduled to be held later this week. What do you expect to come out of this? Any concrete progress to be detected on your part?
Well, my guess is that there'll be some preliminary discussion about what the overall format will be. The Taliban, in terms of more immediate goals, talk about the removal of foreign fighters from Afghanistan, the release of prisoners. They talk about some constitutional changes that favor them, among other demands. But I think the long-term strategic goal of the Taliban remains unclear. The Taliban is really an umbrella term that's used to describe a host of different groups, and that is intrinsic to the problem. And there have been reports over the past few months when there have been less formal contacts in Dubai and Norway and Qatar, that in fact people who were considered to be representatives of the Taliban were not considered by the Taliban leadership in Qatar to actually represent the Taliban. So there's a very real question about what constitutes the Taliban, and of course within that more nebulous set of parameters, there are militants and there are those that are more in sync with this set of proposed negotiations.
So difficult, tough sledding there. Of course, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and China have been out in front and trying to broker some sort of agreement. Can you talk to us about the role of China in these talks, given the fact that it's a neighbor of Afghanistan?
Well, the context is that China and Pakistan have shared a very long, friendly relationship since Pakistan became independent in 1947. The Chinese also, as you know, share a border with Afghanistan. And I think there's some real concern, as some reports have suggested, that there might be some contagion effect that might affect the Uyghur population in Xinjiang, the region of the country, and that this might pose a problem in terms of overall constraint of that unrestful condition.
Talk to me about the wild card. Natalie mentioned ISIL in her piece. ISIL obviously has to be a consideration and a concern.
What we know about ISIL, at least publicly, is that they have a presence in Afghanistan. This, interestingly enough, really scares both the government and the Taliban. The Taliban run the risk of being eclipsed by ISIL, and there have been reports that there has been a peeling away of certain Taliban supporters and activists to the ISIL cause. And from the point of view of this rather fragile unity government between President Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah, the chief executive of Afghanistan, there have been difficulties in terms of holding ground against the Taliban, and an infusion of ISIL influence and support might compound their problems seriously.
Well, all the things you're discussing, and we just saw in the piece, the critics saying that international forces withdrew too quickly, Afghan troops ill-prepared. A lot of this sounds like kind of the same cauldron we saw with Iraq. Do you think it's those are legitimate concerns, and do you see any comparison?
Well, I don't think it's entirely fair to criticize the Obama administration in this way. Several days after President Ghani became president, there was a security arrangement that was signed with the United States, and following that, a NATO agreement signed with Afghanistan. And the Obama administration has roughly 9,800 American troops now in Afghanistan, the goal being to remove them before the president leaves office. But the president has taken a flexible approach to this, and I think understands that the situation on the ground is very volatile and might require either an extension or, conceivably some insertion of additional American forces. But the number of 10,000 has been suggested as the minimal number by analysts for the United States military special operations groups to continue to do their work, and for the CIA to continue to do its work in terms of counterterrorism.
Richard Chasdi joining us from Troy, Michigan. Thanks so much.